Welcome back to another video, people, and today I would actually call this video the second installment of a video that I've made about a year ago, where I first recommended 5 different photography documentaries or photography related documentaries that you should watch, and many of you kindly complimented that list in the comments and suggestions, and so fast forward a year later, here I am after watching many of your suggestions to kind of come up with a sort of updated list and, hopefully kind of talk to you about documentaries that you might enjoy watching. And hopefully I'll be here in a year time doing the same thing and we can kind of do this like sort of yearly tradition. Let's see how it goes. But for now, I want you to grab a drink, make yourself comfortable, and let's go straight to another video. So one of you recommended me this documentary a while back, as I said, and I watched it and it made me dive into Sally Mann's work. And I even made a video on the channel about her work, which translates how good this documentary was in talking about the importance of Mann's work and how inspirational she can be to many of us, particularly when we struggle with what to photograph. As she says at some point during the movie, quote, "One of the things my career as an artist might say to young artists is that the things that are close to you are the things that you can photograph the best." And Mann is a photographer primarily known for her images that explore the ideas of love, the inevitability of life and death, aging, and really, in a broader spectrum, I would say human condition, through a close look at her own family and surroundings. And Sally Mann has a very unique sort of body of work in the sense that it comprises around her family and surroundings, but in different senses. We capture the idea of aging, we capture the idea of death. She has a very interesting sort of work around a body farm at the University of Tennessee. So have a look at her website for, all her photography. And if you haven't, catch up with the video that I made on her. And of course, watch the documentary if you're interested in knowing more about her and also like her philosophy as a photographer. Jamel Shabazz, street photographer, is a great watch in my opinion, and if you're someone who appreciates cultural history, street photography, and the documental nature of photography, then you're most definitely going to enjoy discovering the photography of Jamel Shabazz, who in the early 80s roamed around Brooklyn, New York as a teenage photographer documenting the rise of the hip-hop movement in a city that faced great challenges at this point in time with the rise of addiction and crime. Shabazz's images are vibrant, colorful, and to some extent, I would say, also nostalgic. I love how they capture the people of New York City, but at the same time almost transmit the attitude, the culture almost, and the feel of the city. I also think Shabazz's words, as well as other people's testimonials throughout the documentary, combined with the images themselves, the found footage, and etc., create a great portrait of a place and a time many of us wouldn't necessarily know about it if it wasn't for the great work that photographers who, like Shabazz, have recorded crucial political, social, and cultural moments in history. So this is what I call a fan favorite, and that is because I wouldn't be exaggerating by saying that 50 to 60% of the comments on my last video were mentioning this documentary, and so I'm here to correct my mistake because I should have actually included this documentary at first in the first installment, but here I am to talk about Salt of the Earth. So Salt of the Earth is a documentary that revolves around the impressive photographic work of Brazilian photographer Sebastião Salgado, and it was curiously directed by both his son and Wim Wenders, whose photography we've also highlighted here on the channel. And this documentary really highlights Salgado's documentary work around the life and experience of many deprived communities in the world, particularly in South America and in some regions in Africa. And these are my favorite images that he has ever produced. And this is just a reminder that Salgado has a comprehensive body of work photographing people, landscapes, and animals, which he actually included all of it in one of his latest books called Genesis. And I want to, on the topic of Salgado, kind of maybe challenge you to let me know, do we pick it up another book? I have actually one of his books but it's not Genesis. But what if we pick up one of his books, maybe Genesis, and we do kind of like a combo sort of episode on books, and wish we can talk about the 2 different books that he's done. Let me know down below if you'd like to see an entire episode of that series dedicated to Sebastião Salgado and the things that we can learn from him. And now I'd like to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Wondershare's Recover It, which is a software that comes in handy in situations where we photographers and creatives experience data loss. So in these situations, we can count on Recover It to help us recover photos or videos accidentally deleted, files damaged by viruses, or damage created by power outage. But besides this, the new version of Recover It also offers the ability to rescue your data from external storage devices such as SD cards or external disks, whilst also offering a more optimized user experience with faster loading and support of more raw file formats, and of course improved compatibility with Mac devices, which to me has been extremely helpful since I use one. Recover It's latest version is out now, and by following the links in the description you can trial it out for free and also learn more about its functionality. And now let's go back to the video. If you're familiar with the channel, you know I really appreciate Robert Frank's photography. I've highlighted the Americans in many videos here, but I have yet to make a documentary on Robert Frank. So until then, I'll leave you with an excellent recommendation, and that is Don't Blink, Robert Frank, which is a documentary that has a more intimate approach, I would say, and sort of follows Frank's narration, perspective, and a really sort of creative ramble, at least for the first part of the documentary, on his creative process and philosophy. One important question that this film poses, at least to me, is how a photographer is able to capture the nuances of a culture from a pure observational point of view. If you're familiar with The Americans, you know it's been incredibly revered for the content of the images themselves and the subtle commentary they propose, amongst many other reasons, of course. But I think this documentary really presents an interesting perspective from which we photographers can learn a lot from. Plus, it also features great figures of the Beat generation, such as poet Allen Ginsberg. And needless to say, the music choices are pristine. Harold Feinstein is, curiously enough, someone who we haven't talked about here on the channel yet. So here's an opportunity to introduce his work to you through this very inspirational documentary on his life and career. And Feinstein's really known as a master of black and white street photography whose career spanned over 6 decades from the late 1940s until, I would say, the end of his life in 2015. Feinstein is one of those Saul Leiter or Fred Herzog cases, meaning individuals who received their much-deserved recognition in a later stage of their lives. In his website, though, I found, of course, the perfect synopsis for this documentary, and it goes like this, quote, "The rediscovery of Feinstein's vast and diverse body of work came in his final years, and the film meets him then, in his early 80s, and with a Zen-like appreciation for the life he lived. Through the testimonials of friends, lovers, family members, and photography experts, this atmospheric film paints an intimate yet honest portrait of this complex and inspirational underdog of the 20th century of photography." Now, I'm throwing Grain, this documentary, here in the mix of this list because I think I wanted to have something a bit different. And this documentary talks about what's been happening in recent years in photography, and that is the resurgence of analog photography. And it's interesting because it's not your typical film versus digital. And you guys know, I've talked about this before. For me, it's not even a sort of, I would say, battle or a question. I mean, for me, you shoot with, you work at the end of the day, these are tools, you work with what's best for you. If it's both, if it's one, if it's the other, I don't really care. What my interest is that we do the best we can with what we have. And I think that's the most important thing at the end of the day. And so it's interesting, although, to kind of watch this documentary because it really poses some interesting questions as to why this happened and what this can mean for the future. And so within this documentary, we have sort of an examination of what this resurgence means. Is it a trend? Is it backlash against the fast-paced consumerist world we live in? Is this a superficial movement, or is it more deeper than what we expect? And I found this documentary really, really interesting because it proposes that we photographers think of photography and what does it mean to us and what are our tools. And so thinking of cameras as tools, and why do we have such tools? Why do we choose them, for instance? So there's a more philosophical approach in the sense that to me the film touches on very important questions. Plus, we also have the perspective of photographers of different generations and styles, such as, for instance, Bruce Goldin or Alex South, which I think adds more value to what's being asked and discussed in the first place. This is probably one of my favorite documentaries in today's list, and that is because I have always appreciated the honest brutality of Nan Goldin's work, but also because through this documentary I learned of how her photography really pushed for social change and how herself as an activist really casted a light on issues that still plague today's society. In All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, we explored the life and career of Nan Goldin, her role and her advocacy during the AIDS crisis in the 80s, but also her fight against the Sackler family for their role in the current opioid epidemic that proliferates the States. What's interesting here is that Goldin doesn't just document these experiences as someone who is non-participant and so from a purely observational perspective. Actually, it's not the case. The people she captures are her friends, and she's not afraid of turning the camera to herself. So it's a mix of you're a photographer documenting a harsh reality, but at the same time an active participant in said reality. Now, do have in mind that this documentary in particular is going to touch on topics that are a bit heavier. It's not your quote-unquote easier watch as some of these other documentaries in this list would be, but I think it's such an important watch nonetheless. And there's actually a book by Nan Goldin that I've been meaning to get for a really long time. I think it's called The Ballad of the Sexual Dependency. I'm not sure. Should double check really, but you let me know down in the comments what it is, the exact title. And you know, I'm open to get it and maybe we can do a video about it. Let me know if you'd like me to explore, maybe do a documentary on her work as well here on the channel. But until then, leave your suggestions below, and hopefully in a year I'll be sitting here in this chair and making another video with more documentaries out there, and hopefully spreading a bit more inspiration that, you know, through the titles that will allow you to perhaps meet new photographers, debate new, photographic topics, or even like discover new work that you might enjoy. So this has been the video for today. I really appreciate you for watching, and the links to my work and everything, that my website, etc. are down below if you're interested in checking it out. And of course, links to the sponsors of today's video, who I'd like to thank so much for kindly supporting the channel. And yeah, I guess that without further ado, take care, stay safe, keep shooting, keep creating, keep learning photography, and I'm out. Peace.